Welcome, everybody. My name is Jason, co-founder of Swift Industries, and you're tuned in to episode 2, season 7 of Stoked Spoke. And tonight, I am not your host. We have 2 very special guest hosts this evening. But before I introduce them, I have a few announcements. All right, there's lots of coordination on the back end tonight, so bear with me as I make it through. Tonight is our Femme Trans Women and non-binary evening for Stoked Spoke. Stoked Spoke, if you're wondering, is an adventure and route sharing series that we started here in Seattle in real life about 7 years ago. And we started it as a way to get our bike camping and bike packing community together when it was cold and raining and gets dark at 4 p.m. Here in Seattle. So for those of you that have never been here, you don't want to come here. It's horrible, except for in the summer. Anyway, yeah, so we started Stoked Spoke in Seattle. It's been growing for years. We have it at a local watering hole, and we've been asked for a long time to somehow record or make it a video, tape it. We've tried that and it never worked, and I guess it just took a global pandemic for us to finally make the move to make this a virtual event. So that's where that originated. All right. So I won't take up too much more of your time before I bring our guest hosts in. But before I do, I wanted to make one more quick announcement that we will be dropping some very limited edition special products in the next few days. So if you can keep an eye out for that on Instagram and our newsletter. If you're not tuned in to either of those spots already, please follow along with Swift, and there'll be links down below in the show notes. There's lots of people chiming in the chat. That's really fun. Hi, everybody. All right. Whoopsies. There we go. I'm going to introduce our very special guest hosts. We have 2 hosts tonight. One hailing from Seattle, Washington, where I am right now, is Jess Kim. Jess and I met, I don't know how we met, actually. We met through bike stuff here in Seattle. I do know that a couple years ago at a film screening at a local bike shop here called Good Weather, we started talking about her guest hosting a BIPOC night for Stoked Spoke when we used to do these things in real life. And last year we made that happen. And let's see, welcome Jess. And then our other guest host is Devin Cowens. Devin and I met on the phone like 6 or 8 months ago. I don't know. We were kind of in the works of planning a different event, and but I know her through Swift's involvement in the WTF Bike Explorers, and my Swift co-founder Martina had the opportunity to ride bikes with Devin last year in Tucson, and thought she'd be a really great person to work with. So welcome, Devin.
Hi.
Yeah, it's so nice that you both agreed to be a part of this. So I'm really excited for this evening. Since it is a FTW NB evening, I am going to see my way out and help out from the background. So y'all have a good show.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks to Swift for having us. Jess and I are both friends of Swift and really stoked to be here. Stoked for Stoked Spokes. Okay. Jess and I are organizers in the FTW NB grassroots bike explorers community, and first met through WTF Bike Explorers, which has since changed their name to Radical Adventure Riders, to better reflect the intentions of the movement toward gender inclusivity and racial equity in the bicycle adventure community. You can find them on Instagram at radical.adventure.riders. And in case you're not hip to the game, they also started the Cycling Industry Pledge. Essentially, they're holding companies accountable to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in the cycling community. So, intros. I'm Devin. My pronouns are she, her. I reside on the ancestral lands of the Muskogee Creek Nation, today known as Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a connector, an event planner, an advocate for BIPOCs in cycling, a proud member of the Radical Adventure Riders Gravel team, and I manage a local bike packing group for women, trans, femme, and non-binary riders in Atlanta. Jess?
Hello, interwebs. Uh-oh, I hear a little feedback. I think it's, okay, I think it's my feedback. This is a transparent facilitation. Devin, I think you might have to mute. Maybe, or someone else. Okay, yeah, good, cool. Thanks, Jason and Swift, for having us. Yeah, I don't remember when Jason and I first met, but it's been a couple of years, and it feels like it's been a lifetime already. And a quick note that Devin and I actually met a couple years ago on the East Coast, and I failed to convince her to move to Seattle when she was in bicycling advocacy world, still is, of course. And for myself, my name is Jess. I go by she and they pronouns. I am coming to you from Seattle, from the Duwamish Coast Salish territories. About myself, you might know me from the cycling world in Seattle. For my work, I work in the public sector designing bicycle and multimodal transportation infrastructure. So all the bike lanes and stuff you see around here, you can blame me for it. Too bad. We can fight about it later. In my work and in community, I strive to dismantle institutional racism through collective organizing and mutual aid efforts, all by the seat of my saddle and on the digital space, like we are here today. So one thing to acknowledge while we're all here in this digital world, it's amazing and such a privilege that we can see each other. I don't know how many folks are here from outside of the States, but I want to give a digital land acknowledgement to recognize the inequity of the digital realm. Since we're convening here virtually, I'd like to take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technological structures, which includes the infrastructure of high-speed internet, which is not available in many Indigenous communities, although it may cut right through their native lands. And even the technologies which are central to our ability to come together virtually has a significant carbon footprint and contributes to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples worldwide. And Devin will give a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Jess. We reside on the unceded territory of the Duwamish Coast Salish of so-called Seattle, Washington, and Muskogee Creek Nation of so-called Atlanta, Georgia, the Indigenous nations and territories we settle and recreate on. We honor the present and ancestral lands, ancestral stewards of these lands, and acknowledge the privilege of living in these beautiful places. We recognize the responsibility we have to organize, work, and care for these grounds, to practice good land stewardship, to educate ourselves on Native histories and present, and to support Indigenous-led activism. We raise our hands to the ancestors and hold ourselves accountable to these practices and to the Duwamish Coast Salish peoples and the Muskogee Creek Nations.
thank you for joining us in that land acknowledgement. I believe in personal accountability, and if you've stuck with us this far, and you know either of us, you owe it to yourselves to be accountable, and we owe it to ourselves to be held accountable to cultivate a world that really embodies our identities and our values. In a few slides, you'll see a whole list of ways you can support Indigenous sovereignty woven into a whole list of FTW NB-led organizations. And Devin will go through some housekeeping items for us today. Even though we're not in the physical space, there is some housekeeping.
Thanks, Jess. So just a few notes. Keep your eyes on the chat box. Enter questions there for Q&A. We'll build in time for that after each presenter. And we'll have a 5-minute intermission for bio and stretch break. And after the live event, the routes and brief descriptions of each of our presenters will be on the Swift Industries blog. And in the YouTube show notes, you'll find routes, descriptions, and links to the organizations that the presenters mention that they want to lift up that are doing work in their various communities. And we'll also have closed captioning available after the YouTube live event. Jess is going to give us some Swift updates and thank our sponsors.
Yeah. So Swift Industries is here in Pioneer Square in Seattle. They have a physical thing happening. They have a wheel building class on March 20th and 21st, and it's 2 days. And I was specifically asked that is not a sleepover. You can't sleep at Swift headquarters. You can, however, sleep outdoors and rent some really cool bikes that Swift has designed and custom made with Kona bikes. And of course, it's fitted with their own sweet bags as well. That's what it looks like. It's pretty cool. They have all sizes too, a bunch of different sizes. And then we want to thank our sponsors, of course, that help make this event possible. We've got Velocio, The Radivist, Topo Designs, and Ride with GPS. They all help us keep us comfy on the saddle and get us to where we need to go and read up all about the cool bike things that are happening in the world. And so, why are we here today? Why is there a special night for FTW NB folks? As Femme Trans women and non-binary bodies, our stories of adventure are often overshadowed by cis male folk who have dominated outdoor spaces. Our experiences are unique and deserve to be heard to change preconceived notions of who gets to play outside freely without fear of harassment, assault, or explanations because of our gender or sexuality. With tonight's event and upcoming BIPOC Stoked Spoke events, we are intentionally giving space to those whose stories deserve a special spotlight. So, wherever you are located on this big blue beauty, I ask the folks who identify as cis men to ask yourself, wait, as in, why am I talking? Before taking space in the chat box. And I want to invite all of the Femme Trans, non-binary women folk to take space in the chat box as you please. And I encourage you to please take this practice outside of the event as well. I think I see that there's already some buggers in the chat box. So community, please come pick up your boy if you need. If you can, please, so we don't have to. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. I love you. So as Jess said, we want to uplift and elevate FTW NB folks, and as such, we're going to be highlighting some orgs doing work in our various communities. Each of our speakers will do that as well in their presentation. They'll share some of their favorites, and as far as local impacts, you'll want to screenshot the following slide for a list. This is definitely not exhaustive, but includes bicycle-related FTW NB businesses and orgs led by or in support of our communities. We'll also have this slide listed during intermission in case you want to check back on that. And we encourage you to holler in the chat box for FTW NB orgs in your own communities that are doing work that you want to shout out. So I will pass it off to Jess to introduce us to the first speaker.
All right. I am going to do this stop screen share. Yeah, so it just does. Cool. Transparent facilitation here, y'all. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today with all of y'all for a second year in a row, I guess. And it is my pleasure to introduce Sarah, who is coming to us from Seattle as well. Sarah works in the transportation industry, encouraging sustainable modes of travel. She is the co-chair of the Bike Advisory, or the Seattle Bike Advisory Board, where she advocates for safe bike infrastructure for all ages, races, genders, and abilities. In her spare time, she values spending time in nature and doing art projects. I think we should be friends. Sarah, take it away. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. Excited to be here. So as I said, I'm Sarah Udelhofen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm presenting from Seattle, the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish. I've been going to Stoked Spoke since about 2016, so I'm excited to be here this evening, and even though we're virtual. So in my eyes, an ideal bikepacking trip consists of plentiful snacks, a handful of lazy swims, and some ice cream stops, gorgeous scenery, and just a little bit of suffering and challenge. In the summer of this past year, 5 friends and I made our way from Klamath Falls, Oregon to Portland through 400 miles and a lot of elevation. And along the way, we learned some things about adventure dynamics, expressing one's needs, and resilience, and we had a lot of fun too. So since 2016, my bike has been my main mode of transportation to get around the city. I did a handful of road tours each year, and over the past couple of years, I've been getting into bike packing and off-road trips, but this was kind of my first opportunity to plan a gravel trip longer than just 3 days. I decided to make my life easier and pick a route that was already curated by some experienced people online. So a big shout out to the website Our Mother the Mountain. We did the Oregon Cascades Volcanic Arc 400. I want to recognize that this route goes through Indigenous lands, including Klamath, Cow Creek Umpqua, Molalla, Kalapuya, Chinook, and Clackamas. They have stewarded this land for generations, and we were lucky for the opportunity to travel through these places. We started south and we went north. This trip was about 400 miles and 29,000 feet of elevation gain. It was about half gravel, half pavement, and a little bit of single track. So I basically took their route, made a copy, and I tweaked it. I had to figure out where to stop and camp, where to refuel our food and water. The Our Mother the Mountain folks did it in about 3 or 4 days. And after a lot of pondering, we landed on doing it in 6 days. Some of us had to be back at work. When I had the idea to plan a bigger trip, I made a Google Doc outlining the type of trip I was hoping to have, setting expectations, if you will, along with the full details about the route to make sure people knew what they were getting into. I really didn't want to pressure anybody into coming. I gently encouraged and provided details, but overall really wanted to make sure people joined on their own accord. So here are the 5 other lovely humans who opted to join me on this adventure at their will. This was during COVID, so we all got tested before and took precautions. I knew everyone, but not everyone knew each other. We've got Mike M, and then myself, Kelly, my brother, Mike U, Allie, and Reed. A lot of these people are in the chat. Hello, everyone. So my brother and I thought we knew each other well, but being in the middle of nowhere for 7 days with your sibling is the next level of family closeness. Everyone else got to know each other pretty quickly. We all Tetrised our bikes and bodies into a 15-passenger van, drove 5 hours from Portland to Klamath Falls, and camped. And then the next morning, we untangled everything in a Fred Meyer parking lot and got ready to roll. Later than expected, of course. After all the anticipation, it felt good to finally get out there and just do the thing. Woo. So we quickly hit the first of many long, dusty climbs in the afternoon heat. It was challenging and just a tiny introduction to the hills that we'd encounter over the week. We made it up to the sand spires just as it was getting dark, and then set up camp at Lost Creek Campground, a little ways away from Crater Lake. The next morning, we packed up, filtered water in a nearby stream, and had a climb up to Crater Lake with some very beautiful blue skies, great weather. We got some obligatory group shots and sibling photos to send to our parents for a sibling bike trip We had a glorious downhill, which led us into Diamond Lake. This is like the quintessential bike stop. There's pizza, there's ice cream, there's swimming, there's friendly people who are also like, what the hell are you doing? At this time, unfortunately, Kelly's GPS had been struggling to load the route a bit, and her phone was having some trouble too. Technology just doesn't always work how it's supposed to. But Kelly is probably one of the most energetic people that I know. She exudes positivity at all times, so wasn't worried. But we hung out at this lake a little bit too long. We finally peeled away and we were back on the gravel with lots and lots of steep hill sections. Just a note, gravel can be a lot slower than roads, can be a lot more tiring as well. The group started kind of spreading out and regrouping at times. This is something we'd said we were okay doing before the trip, but we hadn't explicitly discussed what to do if we were waiting a little bit longer than expected for someone. Kelly had said it was okay for us to keep moving, and we were actually kind of leaving these stick arrows and messages at turns, which was fun. But as the sun started to set, I was getting worried. I realized I wasn't positive if she had the map downloaded or not. Her bike setup wasn't quite as forgiving with the gravel either. So the rest of us stopped. We talked about it. Some people felt comfortable continuing. I was worried about like ditching my friend in the middle of the forest. Kelly really had not seemed worried about it at all. So amazingly, just as we decided to send someone back to find Kelly, a pickup truck came down the road with Kelly and her bike in the back. And of course, she was smiling in a great mood. So that was great. This was a big relief. It was a learning lesson to have these types of conversations around the dynamics of an adventure. So the next day, it's feeling like we're really out there, but also look at the elevation map for the day. Big hills. In my mind, I was thinking there's a bakery we can stop at for lunch, must get to that bakery. And I think in my brother's mind, he was thinking, oh, there's a cool extra single track option, super fun on the side. So neither of us told each other what we were thinking at this point, I think. From what I remember, we exchanged some kind of salty words maybe and went our separate ways. As I rode, I realized that everyone has their own stuff going on in their brain. Being aware of your needs and communicating them to the group is really helpful and it's really healthy. There was room for all parties to do what they wanted in this trip. Some of us took the road and some took the single track, and that's perfect. We all got to have the type of trip that we were looking for. So the Speedy Road crew had smooth sailing, we had very pretty scenery, and we made it to the bakery with plenty of time. I was able to eat 2 entire meals, which is very ideal in my book. It's good. And at this point, Kelly had been in a face-off. It was her bike versus the gravel. The gravel was kind of winning. A pro tip here, learn how to fix everything like Mike, you, and Reed can do. They're both volunteers at the bikery where they can help you fix your bike yourself. Great things to do. So back at the bakery, Kelly very matter-of-factly was like, I'm going to take my own route back to Portland on the roads. I think I'm going to have a totally great time that way. So I was really impressed at her decisiveness, just very firm with that. So we said, see you later, and we parted ways. It wasn't until about 3:30 p.m. that day that we left the bakery, went and got groceries, and then we were back in the heat. If we take a look at the elevation map again, we were planning to get a good way up and over the second hump to camp. But we ended up kind of hitting some more reality checks and decided to stop it and to camp early. The next morning, we were super glad that we had not kept riding because we immediately hit some downed trees and hike-a-bike sections, and then more of these, and then more of these. Lifting fully loaded bikes can be really heavy, can be really exhausting. Yeah, but we got past those obstacles. We had some really great views, and we were on some pretty awesome downhill, only to round a quarter and come face to face with a massive gravel truck coming directly at us. Ugh. There was an entire train of these gravel trucks. There were probably like 15 of them on the entire descent down. They were loud. It was unpleasant. It was nerve-wracking. I didn't like it. We were totally covered in dust. So that was just another time. We were glad to get out of that. I was definitely a little shaken, a little irritated. But then we came across this totally random, awesome cafe with a koi pond. Really random. So we sat down and someone said something like, I don't know if I can make it back to Portland in time. Maybe I'll look up if there are car rentals nearby. I was like, oh no, are we really at that point? But luckily, Reed, who's kind of the voice of reason, said order food first, eat, and then let's talk. So this is where the resilience trait comes in for bike touring, being able to refuel and keep going, even though you don't know what other kind of madness you're going to run into. We had some tough discussions here, but decided to just keep riding, trusting that we would figure it out as we rode. On day 5, we talked to a forest ranger in the town of Detroit. There were wildfires in the area. There's a lot I could say about this and the horrible devastation to local communities. But to keep it short, if you're planning a trip in the West in the summer, read up and be prepared for wildfires. We decided it was okay to continue. We had some fun food discoveries like huckleberries and this very exciting assortment of gas station foods. And we pushed hard these last 2 days. Then Mike and Reed even did an extra side trip and hiked up to camp at a lookout, which looked amazing. And the rest of us rode back down in the dark down the steep hill, which was also fun. So going into this trip, my expectation was that we'd have some hard riding, but also that we'd have a bit of chill time. I even brought my travel watercolor set and a Kindle, things I definitely didn't touch. So in reality, everything took quite a bit longer and some days were pretty tough, but I'd say it was all totally worth it. We had a lot of unexpected cool little moments, and we did get to swim and we did get to have ice cream. We got to know each other super well and each made it the kind of trip that we were hoping for individually. And in the end, we did find Kelly again, which was awesome, and we all rode back into Portland together. So that was our trip. And I know people always have questions about bikes and gear, so this is just a slide of what my setup was. All right. There's Jess and Devin. Hello. I wish that we could hear people in person at the Rhino Room.
I know, right? It's not like the Rhino Room, and it's not like a Zoom call either, where we're just like, reaction here, yay, whatever. That sounds like an amazing trip. I don't see any questions coming in so far, so I guess I'll just ask one off the top of the dome here. What is what would you say is you wish you knew about this trip before you went on it, if there's anything?
I guess I wish I realized how much elevation there was. I had tried to do some calculations, like looking at some past Strava data of some of the biggest climbs that I had done, just to kind of get a concept of how much elevation per day was realistic. And I mean, I did some research and looked into it, but we were like, we'll be fine, it'll be great. But that much elevation day after day after day, it's just tiring with such a big group. But it was still fun. I would do it again, maybe with a couple more days though.
Yeah. So we had a few questions. I'll start with whatever I saw first. I think Becca, the question was, would love to hear how you made the frame bag, where you got the materials and what kind of sewing machine you used.
Yeah, yes. I'm pretty into arts and crafts, so I'd always wanted to make a frame bag, and doing this trip finally convinced me that I needed to make it happen. So I actually had some leftover fabric from some outdoor seat cushions that I made. So it was like a slightly thicker canvas. So I used that along with some Cordura. And then there's a place up on Aurora, I think it's just Seattle Fabric Supply, that I went to get some extras like the zipper and the Velcro, things like that. And I was able to make it on my regular sewing machine, but it nearly broke my sewing machine. So highly recommend getting a heavy duty sewing machine or borrowing one from a friend if you're looking to make a frame bag. But yeah, not too hard.
Cool. The next question is, given some of the challenges, would you plan for anything different? Maybe fewer days, something else?
I think I would probably do the same trip, but just do it with more time. It's always amazing to have like a 10-day trip and to get to go at your own speed and to really stop and enjoy like cool scenery moments, or sit at that ice cream for like or sit at the Diamond Lake for the whole day and like eat ice cream because you can, rather than really having to be on a schedule. So I would definitely do it in more days.
Yeah, those rest days are real crucial sometimes. You just gotta listen to your body. Someone is asking, what kind of training did you do for this trip, if at all?
Yeah. Since this happened in September, I had been riding all summer long and doing a fair amount of, day rides when I could on the weekends, up to like, 30, 40, 50, 60 miles just to keep the miles up. And then did probably a handful of weekend trips. But before this year, I hadn't had big tires that I could take on gravel. So there's a lot in like east of the city in Seattle. There's some great places to go that are not too far away to get some gravel riding in. So I did a handful of trips on gravel, I'd say beforehand, just like day trips. And I think that helped me a lot, just have better handling on gravel versus like a friend or two of mine that joined didn't have that experience. And I think it just takes a little while to adapt. So.
Yeah. Got a couple lightning round questions. What was your total elevation?
Well, the whole thing was it 29,000? I think. I forget. I'm not good at remembering numbers. That's why I was on the slides.
It was many, I'm sure. How much water were you carrying day to day?
Again, it's another thing I'm not super particular on the numbers. So I had one big water bladder that's old. I don't know how large it is. It's kind of like a normal size looking one, and about 2 liters in bottles. So every opportunity that we came to, we filled up at towns. That was at least like every other day or once a day. And we did have water filters as well. So there was only one day where we got up on the top of a very high elevation. I think it was the day that Mike and Reed slept in the lookout tower, that we thought there was going to be water up there, but there was no water. So I think we divided it up, and that's why some of us rode down at night too.
Wow, that's intense. Okay, one last question before we hand it out to Devin. Someone is asking, Marge is asking, if you have any bike packing or touring heroes.
Oh. Honestly, I have to say my brother Mike. He's definitely somebody who got me into riding bikes, and has been super helpful and supportive for my entire time with learning about bikes and getting out there and doing harder trips and pushing me and challenging me. So really, that's one of them, to be soft.
I love that. Thank you so much for presenting. I hope to join you on a ride sometime. And everybody in the chat, give it up for Sarah. That was dope. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Devin, take it away.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and Jess for facilitating that. I have the pleasure of introducing Natalia Cortez. Nat is 25 years old and a proud daughter of Mexican immigrants. She's lived her life making the most of her tough surroundings in Southern California. Hey, Nat. Outspoken and honest, you can always count on her to tell you what's up on and off the bike. She's now part of leadership within the Radical Adventure Riders Gravel team.
Hello, what's up?
Welcome. Are you ready to cue up your slides, Nat?
I am. I'm ready. Let's get into this. Hello, everyone. My name is Nat. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be talking about my first bikepacking trip ever. This trip is really special to me because it is a trip that would change my life in ways that I couldn't have imagined. And it's just really cool to look at one event in your life and really look at that as a game-changing moment. So let's get started. So the route is a big scramble, It's 169 miles over 4 days with about 15.6 thousand feet of climbing. And it's a loop that starts and ends in Monterey, California. Let me know if you've ever ridden around here. Sarah Weiner was the organizer of the ride. And I remember reading an email saying that it was going to be a tough ride, a tough, trip, right? Did I really understand how tough it was going to be? Definitely not. It was my first time. I had nothing else to compare it to. The term dipping my toes was not applicable at all. I definitely just dove in headfirst, got to the bottom as deep as I could get, hence the title of this little presentation. And really, this trip was like a spark that lit a fire within me, right? This little fire of determination that like my heart wouldn't like let go. And it really, expanded what I thought I could, do with my life. This group is really special because the ride was organized as part of the Radical Adventure Riders Grassroots Series. So that's when everybody from across the country planned routes and rides. This was in 2019, so pre-COVID. You could read the mission there, but at the heart of the organization, we're just trying to increase gender inclusivity and racial equity. And as I just did want to give a quick shout out to Specialized who supported it in part by paying for the campsites and all that. And this was my first introduction to this kind of community, and it was my first taste of what it's like to be in a really intentional space that is specific to non-binary, trans, femme, and women, all over 4 days, right? And so getting to know all the folks in this group really made me see more in myself and see more of the world too, and how, we don't have to live on the binary. So that was really neat. I will never get over how lucky I was to have had this group. And I really wanted to take time to share them because they really represent the NB FTW community, right? Every person had an interesting story. These folks in particular left a really permanent mark in my memory and are people that I definitely look up to and are mentors to me. Everett, the slingshot, was really the person who encouraged me to go on the ride and told me that I could do it, even as a first timer. Jay, I saw you in the chats. I want to give a huge shout out to Jay for taking these beautiful photographs and really documenting this special moment. As a trans man, he really wants to use his photography skills to bring more representation to that group. So if you want to support his work, go check it out, please. Get him some good work, beautiful photos, really great, rad time. I like to think of this trip under 3 different themes, I guess, or like words. Day 1 for me was definitely a day of uncertainty, right? I was tossing and turning the night before, wondering if I was going to be able to do it, right? When you try something for the first time, there's often more questions than answers, right? You just don't know what's going to happen, especially on a trip with only 2 resupply points and 2 days with no access to water in October, which is a really dry season in California. So I was stressing out. I was like, oh my gosh, am I prepared for this? And luckily I was. And fortunately for me, the first day was definitely the hardest day out of the 4. At that point, I had only ridden 35 miles and the first day was 59 miles. So it was quite the difference in mileage. And it was hard. But the group and the morale and the support and the anti-bonk juice that someone shared with me, which is half Coca-Cola, half lemonade. Thanks to those things, I was able to make it. And I ended my day at this beautiful sunset that you see here. I cooked my first dinner outdoors and it was definitely undercooked, like soup slush, but it didn't matter. I was just happy that I made it. And I was just excited that, I was able to accomplish this little milestone. Day 2 was a day of determination for me because day 2 was harder than the first day, believe it or not. We were going to summit a mountain, and that was something I had never done before. This is how new I was to everything, right? I woke up that morning knowing that I was going to have to be determined and really dig in and remind myself while I was there. And so as we started the climb, I just started thinking about my mom, right? That morning before we pedaled out, I was talking to Everett in the picture up above that my mom really used the outdoors to escape an abusive relationship. This was before I was born, but, this is like 85, 86. She had just, crossed the border. She's undocumented, didn't really know English or anything like that. But she was carrying around her 4 little kids, camping, trying to, just bring positivity in a moment of darkness in her life. And I don't know. She really did help me get over that mountain. Also, Judy's power stance that you see up there at the top of the mountain is exactly how I felt once I got up there, because, oh boy, that felt like a feat. Day 3 and 4 was a day of embrace for me. Day 3 was a rest day. It was only a 12-mile rugged dirt descent into a river. And something about that day made just like clicked, right? I let go of my uncertainty from day 1. I embraced this new found ability to shred. I was going fast off dirt. It was the first time I was riding off dirt, right? I will always think of this day as the reason why I developed a taste for the off-road and dirt. And I look to this day as a day of encouragement that, led me to try out for the RAR gravel team later on. And not gonna lie, the 12-mile day was definitely needed. I needed the rest. In these pictures, you can kind of see the terrains that we were riding through. In the middle of the descent, we stopped by a spring, and you can see Kai showing me how to use a water filter for the first time. And yeah. Day 4, I was ready to go home. Day 4 was long and hot. You'd stop for 10 seconds and then you'd have a swarm of flies just, drinking up all the salt from your body. I was out of food. The cheese and salami that I had carried turned into like this weird slush because it was so hot. It was really gross. And when we stopped at a cafe and I finally had my first fresh sandwich, I was just thinking, what's next, right? I embraced the fact that this trip was going to end, but I wanted to know what was next. Where else are these little legs gonna, take me? Eventually, as I mentioned earlier, I would find myself in Arizona to try out for the RAR gravel team. And thanks to the SJ Brooks Scholarship from RAR, I was able to fly out there and ride with these awesome people. The pandemic hit pretty much a couple months after this trip, so I never really got the chance. I had one more trip before, unfortunately, the bike that you saw on here got stolen. So I'm really taking this little moment to really share my gratitude to this bike for taking me on this trip and for opening up so many opportunities for me. And yeah, and that's my little spiel. Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like to, keep up with me, there are the handles. Follow a gravel team, show your support. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Nat, for sharing your story. And you did the damn thing. I feel like that's not many of us will just kind of dive headfirst. So it's also a pleasure and an honor to share space with you on the gravel team, and appreciate you being here. So I don't see any questions here. Questions. Here we go. Yeah, so anything you'd wish you'd known before starting your first tour, or things you want to share with folks who are just getting into adventure riding?
Mm-hmm. I think I wish I would have planned my meals better. Jay was an absolute chef on the trip. He had kale and all these fresh vegetables and was sauteing them. And I was just wow, like you don't have to eat like dry food. Like you can actually cook good meals for yourself. So I really would have wished I'd taken the time to think of some like interesting, cute recipes or good recipes to take on a trip with me. Not cheese or not cheese that will melt on the last day and turn into some weird goop.
Who made the anti-bonk juice? Who gave you that tip?
That was Scotty. Scotty was the one. This was it was on day 1, and we had just passed Big Sur, which was the halfway point basically on the first day. And we were at a convenience store, and they just brought a bottle, and they're like, try this out. I was like, okay. And then I tasted it. I was like, what is this? And they were like, oh, it's the anti-bonk juice. It's, half lemonade, half Coca-Cola. You can always count on this to, give you a little pick-me-up when you're feeling down. And yeah, that was actually something that I had to really learn on the trip too. Given making sure you have enough energy and calories. I was not eating enough on the first day. So
I also love how you can bike pack with folks and some of those secret talents come out. Like someone's got a recipe for a drink, or someone else is a secret chef, someone else is a bike mechanic, that kind of thing. So
yeah, at some point someone brought like a little salt and pepper shaker, like a little camp. I was just, what is this cute little things I would never think about. And then I'm like, wow, this is so cool.
The more I bike pack, I'm like, should I start making gourmet meals? Which is like me thinking about like adding, I don't know, like a fancy cheese or like a sun-dried tomato, but I haven't yet. So do you have a plan for your next ride or any other bike packing trips coming up?
I actually would really, when it's safe, I really want to explore or check out the mountains near Santa Barbara. That's a place I like to go to a lot. And so if anyone has any recommendations, I'd greatly appreciate that.
And how did you go about preparing your setup for this trip? Anything you can share resource-wise?
So I definitely look to bikepacking.com and the Radavist to really get ideas on. They have really great resources on what to eat and how to pack your food. And then, of course, just asking friends. I'm so lucky to have had people like Sam and Everett near me to ask questions whenever it needed. So, if you are an experienced bike packer, make sure that, you let people know that your wisdom is able to be shared, because it really does help, and it makes people feel more confident once they do go out on the trip.
Absolutely. A couple of folks in the chat have some information on rides in Santa Barbara, so y'all should definitely connect. Cool. So thanks, Nat, for being here. I think another question. Hold on. What was your favorite piece of gear you utilized on your trip and why? And that'll be our last question.
Oh, I was so fascinated with my water filter, because I've never drank water straight from like a river or a spring before. So I thought it was, it's nothing really that fancy, but I was just mesmerized that, water comes out this little spigot and it's safe to drink. And then some folks on the ride had the fancy, like the black light things that kill the bacteria. And I was like, whoa, that's so dope. But yeah.
Those filters are game changers for sure. Cool. So as we said before, routes and brief descriptions of all the presentations will be on the Swift Industries blog later and in the YouTube show notes. So I think now we're moving into intermission. Is that right, Jess? And we will pop up some rotating slides for folks to check out. So we will reconvene here at what I believe will be 6:25 PST and 9:25 BST. I think I got that right. Thanks, y'all. See you in a bit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. For folks who were at the Rhino Room, Stoked Spoke nights, you know that there's like a mad dash to get to the bar, and there's always a crazy line. I miss those days. I miss people. So I'm just gonna get myself situated here and remind folks that you are here at the Swift Industries YouTube channel for tonight's Stoked Spoke for the Femme Trans women and non-binary speakers. And we had a couple of really amazing trips in our first half, and we've got 3 more trips for you. And I want to remind the audience as well to, for Femme, Trans, and women non-binary identifying folks to utilize the chat as you please. Please ignore whatever nonsense is happening on there. Clearly, tonight is for us. So I want to see those hearts and emojis and love for bike community popping off. Thank you very much. I want to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Brenda. She currently lives on Tohono. Wait, is that right? I'm sorry. Transparent facilitation here. Yeah, okay. Brenda. She currently lives on Tohono O'odham land in Tucson, Arizona. If Brenda's not inside playing Magic the Gathering, you can probably find her outside riding her bike and listening to the Lord of the Rings soundtrack on her way to the nearest Dairy Queen. Her last big bike tour was a solo tour in Scotland that involved a lot of crying. I get that. It's type 2 fun. We're just waiting. There you are. Hey.
Getting it set up here and okay, got it. All right, cool. So hi everyone. Thanks Jess for the intro. Like she said, my name's Brenda. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you live from Tohono O'odham land, also known as Tucson, Arizona. And I'm sharing a trip that happened I think 2 years ago now, but it's a pretty short trip, but it left it was a pretty big deal story afterwards. But yeah, so a lot of the photos are mine. A lot of the photos are Spencer Harding's and Molly Harrison's, and I just want to give them photo credit where it's due, and yeah, I'll start. So I guess the name of the route is White Canyon Ride. It's on Ute and Pueblo land near Haight, Utah, and that's kind of squished between Canyonlands and the Glen Canyon recreational area. It's pretty in the middle of nowhere. I can't even think of like the closest major city that it's by. But yeah, so it was a bike packing / bike rafting trip. It was about a 15-mile loop, 581 feet of elevation gain, which for someone who grew up in the Midwest, you know, that's a decent amount. But I guess it turns out like a lot of y'all are riding some really high stuff. So yeah, a lot of it's just dirt roads, forest roads that we were taking to the edge of Lake Powell, and then like short paddles. And then the plan was to bike up a wash in White Canyon to another dirt road and then have it connect to the highway. And then just a short little thing about Lake Powell. It's named after John Wesley Powell, who's like a famous geologist. But I really want us to take the time to kind of examine him and some of his ideas, and kind of maybe why are we naming places after someone like this. I know he's really famous in environmental circles, but I also want to highlight that he framed his journeys as like in really uncharted areas, which contributed to, you know, more erasure of the Indigenous peoples who lived in those areas. He downplayed the Indigenous contributions to his map making, and he also advocated for government money to be spent civilizing Indigenous people. And I want us to kind of think about whose stories are told and whose names we use when we're traveling in these places, and the impact that has on others and their sense of belonging in the outdoor community. But anyways, back to the trip. This all went very wrong. I mean, not very wrong, but the second half went about as wrong as it could have gone. For those bike nerds out there, the bike that I rode is a cake bike. It's a 24-inch fat bike. That was made by Eric Noren, who makes Peacock Groove bikes in Minneapolis. Cake Bike was kind of his side project, and it was fat bikes that have smaller frames for folks who are smaller bodied. And then the raft that I used was an alpaca caribou raft. Their rafts are really great for, you know, strapping your bike to when you want to do 2 different types of activities. My frame bag is a Hoot Ventures frame bag. They are bag makers located in Minneapolis. This bag has been through hell and back with me, and it is still kicking. And then it was just, I used a Blackburn seat bag. Yeah, and since it was an overnight trip, I didn't have really a lot of food or anything packed in there a lot. I didn't think it was going to take very long to finish this whole journey, but yeah. And then I also bring along my squeaky bell, who I've called Franklin. Franklin's been on quite a few bike tours with me, and he's definitely kind of like my Winston, you know, from the Castaway show. But anyways, day 1, our only goals for that day. Oh, I should mention, everyone on the tour was Molly, Tyler, and my partner, Spencer. But our only goals for this day were to bike 2 miles to the edge of the lake and then paddle about 6 miles to the campsite. The night before we took off, it rained all night, which maybe should have been a cue for us to not go on this trip. But we decided to try it anyways, kind of being like, the worst that could happen is it's going to be muddy. And as you can see from some of these photos, it was quite muddy. We biked down a flowing stream that fed into the lake to get to the edge of the lake. And most of it was just kind of ankle deep mud. It wasn't anything that really, I mean, it was definitely hard to get out of. You can see it was kind of that, peanut butter texture that kind of sticks to everything. But again, luckily we were next to water, so it was pretty easy to wash stuff off. Yeah, so we biked down to the edge of the lake, inflated the rafts, and then loaded our bikes up, and we paddled about 6 miles to the campsite. Along the lake, there is shoreline primitive camping. It's permitted. Campfires are permitted, or they were permitted when we were there. Again, we followed the pack it in, pack it out stuff. This does include poop. So if you're going there or want to repeat this trip, just be aware of that you can't really leave any of that near the water. It also should be noted there's no cell service here at all. Or there wasn't any cell service for the entirety of this trip. So we were kind of just following trying to follow the map that we had created. Yeah, that top left picture is some of that ankle deep mud. It was kind of funny because initially we were able to ride across it. And then while we were riding across it, it was kind of doing this wavy motion, which I had no idea that ground could move that way. And then we kind of got to a certain spot and just kind of sunk down into it. But yeah, we were able to get our bikes out. make it to a little campsite along the lake shore. There really aren't any like trails that I could see when we were there. It was kind of just, you know, if there's a flat spot, let's camp there. So that's kind of where we ended up for the night. So I'm just going to move along to day 2. And our goals for this day was, again, to just paddle another 5-ish miles, bike 2 miles up that wash, back to our truck and so we're able to leave. And this is kind of the moment where it all went, or this day is where it all went wrong. The morning started out easy enough. The paddling was great. Lake Powell's like pretty flat. There's not a lot of quick moving water. So with a fat bike on the front, it can be a little slow going, or at least it was for me anyways. Paddling a pack raft, I found, was very different than paddling a canoe or a kayak, which is what I'm used to. But we managed to scoot our way across the lake and to where we thought was the entrance of White Canyon. It wasn't White Canyon. But we didn't know that. So we kind of just jumped out right into mud and muck. And as you can see, we're pulling our rafts up a stream. We did that for a while, and then we kind of walked closer to shore, and we're trying to make our way along the edge so we wouldn't have to walk upriver, because the rain from the night before had flooded everything. And this was more water than I had seen in the desert in a while. Like I said earlier, this wash was supposed to be dry. So yeah, we got up, we got onto the shore, and we were able to bike. I shouldn't say we were able to bike. Oh my goodness. We were able to bike small sections of it. You know, we ran into this tamarisk forest, as you can see in the top right picture. Tamarisks are this invasive tree, bush, shrub that grows in washes down in the south. And we stumbled upon a whole just like patch of them back in this canyon, which was pretty surprising. I feel like this was one of the few sections that we were actually able to ride this whole trip. A lot of the times the shoreline was crumbling, or it was actual quicksand, which as an adult, I never thought that that would be something that I would have to worry about ever. It's kind of like a thing that you joke about, but turns out it's very real. There was a moment on tour where we kind of got separated, and my partner Spencer had pushed on ahead, and me, Molly, and Tyler couldn't see him, but all of a sudden we heard someone saying, "Help, help, help." And my brain went straight to Spencer's sinking in quicksand. And I'm running and making my way through like these cockleburs. If there wasn't tamarisks, there were cocklebur bushes. So it was pretty slow going. And we ended up running into Spencer, and he had taken a step into the stream, sunk down to about his waist. He had a camera and his bike in one hand, and his sandal was coming off, and he didn't want to let go because his camera would have fallen in the water. He wasn't in any real danger. His camera was in danger, but it definitely freaked us all out. And from that point on, we kind of followed a buddy system, just because the quicksand was very sudden, and it would like suck you up right up to your knees, your waist. Again, like I said, what was supposed to take us a couple hours to, it was only 2 miles up this wash. It took us about 6 hours, and we were pushing our bikes the whole entire time. The shoreline ended up being too dangerous for us to walk along because of the quicksand. It was like taking a step, sinking down. My friend Molly at one point was up to her waist, in this quicksand. And it was really, really freaky. So the safest place we found to walk, even though it was hard and challenging, was pushing our bikes upstream. And we all managed to, it was really, really difficult, especially someone with my fat bike. When the mud started caking on my tires, I feel like it went from weighing, I don't even know how much my bike weighs, like 50 pounds to like dragging another me up the river, like doubling its weight. So by the end of this day, we were all just exhausted, and I don't know how we were able to, we did end up having some fun, but it was kind of incredible how we were able to keep our spirits high and just keep pushing forward through this, because it was, this was definitely, even though it was only 15 miles in 2 days, it is the most challenging bike packing trip I've ever been on. Things I learned, like I said, quicksand's real. I would definitely recommend not going into the desert after it rains all night. Should this bike trip have happened? Probably not. If someone's looking at this route and is like, hey, I definitely want to do that. Do your research, watch the weather. Washes are super dangerous to bike up if there's rain anywhere. Friends are going to keep you alive. We all took turns pulling each other out of the mud, and definitely helped each other along the way. And Cliff Bars are not just for eating. And yeah, that's my trip.
Wow. That's like beyond type 2 fun.
Yeah. I'm not a type 2 person at all.
It's like, why do we do this to ourselves? Like, we love it and we hate it, but like, why? Thank you so much. That was an amazing journey that seems like you went on. We had a couple questions come in. Folks, if you have some more as we go along, I'll try to get to them. Nat is actually curious how one carries their poop out.
So believe it or not, I didn't poop at all on this trip.
I would believe it. I'm scared shitless.
No, I feel like when I'm outside, I kind of just tighten up, and it's like usually a couple days. And like also when you eat Cliff Bars, like that's just like concrete, like there's nothing coming out of there. So I did not experience packing poop out. I guess if I had to, I would use like dog bag, Ziploc bag, If anyone else has a better idea than I do, that was the only trip where I would have to pack poop out, and then I didn't have to. So I don't know.
Yeah. We have a question. How did you carry the raft on the bike or on the handlebars?
Yes.
So quick frequency.
Yeah, so the alpaca rafts, they deflate and they actually roll up pretty small. My bars weren't very wide, so you just deflate it and roll it up tight like you would a tent, and then I used the volet straps to kind of tighten it around my handlebars, and yeah, that's what I did for that.
Mm-hmm. Volet straps are so handy for many things.
Yes.
Someone's asking, how do you have any strategies on how to deal with wet feet?
So for that trip, I just wore sandals, and like getting wet was inevitable. But I know for when I went on my tour in Scotland, something that saved my feet were sealskin socks. They're pretty pricey, and that was definitely one thing I splurged on. But they, if you're not submerging your feet constantly and you want to be protected from rain, sealskin worked wonders, and they're very cozy.
Mm-hmm. And we got a question that says, would you have done it again on fat tires if you would do it again? Or would you suggest smaller ones?
I really like touring on fat bikes. It's kind of like riding a monster truck. I'm not like really super psyched out when I, see something that looks a little rough. I also prefer fat tires when I'm riding through sand. So I would ride a fat bike again. I mean, I take my fat bike on almost every bike tour, but yeah.
Yeah. Devin has a question. How tall are you, Brenda? And what size is your cake bike frame?
I am 5'5", and it's a 16-inch top tube thing. I don't know what that's how Eric measured it. I've never taken a measure to my bike.
I'm guessing that's not your commuter bike.
No, it is not my commuter bike. So it is now exclusively my bike tour bike / my oh shit, I think I'm gonna have to go through some stuff bike. But yeah, it's a little bit small for me, but it's also I like that it's a little bit smaller because I'm able to maneuver it around easier. There's not so much bike, believe it or not, even though it is a fat bike.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I don't see any other questions coming in, but yeah, is there anything that you wish you knew before you went on this trip? Maybe the quicksand or how intense that would be, something else?
Yeah, I mean, the quicksand was definitely the thing that freaked me out the most. I had never seen anyone just get swallowed up waist deep before, in a matter of minutes. That was pretty scary. I guess I just would have known that that's possible. And now that I know that's possible and I see it raining down here at all, I'm just like, nope, I'm not going outside in the desert because of quicksand. So that's something I wish I would have known.
The camera was saved though, right?
The camera was saved. The sandal was also saved somehow. I don't think we lost anything on that trip except maybe part of my soul. Just kidding.
Well, hopefully you've done a lot of self-care this year and last year to regain that.
Yeah, no, it's everything made it out in one piece. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brenda. That was so much fun. Devin is going to introduce our next speaker here.
Thanks, Brenda. And I just want to echo a comment that was said in the chat that I've only seen quicksand in movies or cartoons, and that was unreal. And those photos are great. So I am going to bring in Emily next. So Emily lives in Richmond, Virginia on ancestral Powhatan land. On a day off, she'd rather be riding bikes off-road with particular lean toward mountain biking. Emily works at a small bike shop that is also part grocery store, where she gets to share excitement and more with all styles of cyclists and community members. Emily's 2 little dogs keep her busy at home and any other downtime. Her goal for the year is to become a more educated and mindful forager. So she's been pushing to continue to learn more about our native ecology and ways to incorporate it in everyday living. Thanks for being here, Emily. You can share your screen now. You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, everyone. I'm very bad at technology. Let me share this screen. Thanks for having me. It's been a treat to be at the side of everybody tonight. Such an inspirational and cool group of people. It's been really kind of amazing. Uh-oh. Sorry, I'm struggling. It wants me to share entire screen. Yes. Oh, never mind. I got it. I'm so bad at this, y'all. Here we go. I think I got it, guys. Uh-oh. Let me know. Is this working? Yay, finally. Thanks, y'all. Uh-oh. Wow. Bear with me. Uh-oh. It's really thinking. All right. Sorry, everybody. My internet must be having a day. Well, I wanted to say welcome to the East Coast. And welcome to wild, wonderful West Virginia, where I got to take an absolutely beautiful trip through the ancestral land of the Monacan peoples. Right before I did the trip that we'll talk about tonight, I did a really quick 2-day solo trip from the Cranberry Glades. And I'm going to turn my camera off, so hopefully this works. Through the Cranberry Glades and over Red Spruce Knob, with a northernmost point of this trip ending in Durban, which is a little teeny tiny train town. There's not a lot there. And I ended up camping in that town on a rail trail that was not really like any other rail trail I'd ever been on. It was full of bulldozer tracks and big mud pits. And I rode through super tall, weird, wet grass. And I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was a real treat. So I was excited to plan a route around that. I designed this sort of hopefully to be like a mountain bike trip. Once I realized that I could ride the West Fork Trail up to Canaan Valley and Blackwater Falls, I'd always wanted to do a mountain bike packing trip. So I kind of started to put the pieces together. This trip would involve about 22 miles or 44 total of rail trail, a bunch of little rolling paved roads, and then some pretty challenging single track through Canaan Valley and through the Blackwater Falls nature areas. I ride a single speed mountain bike, and that's kind of just what I had. My partner was going to go on this trip with me, and he was totally down to convert his geared mountain bike to single speed as well, so we could run a similar gear ratio so that nobody was ever really like left waiting for the other person. We would be evenly paced, which was pretty cool and important to us. We started planning this trip, and I made a little map for us. I found some really cool ideas for routes on Ride with GPS, and I used what I had already written and kind of knew about to fill the gaps. A lot of the land on this route was through wildlife management areas, which here on the East Coast are free camping. I think BLMs are a very similar thing on the West Coast. So we knew that there were a bunch of points where we could camp. I went through it, I dug deep on this one because I didn't want us to get stranded. This was a trip in COVID time, and I wanted to make certain that we were as mindful as possible. We, went back and forth for a long time about whether we wanted to even make one store stop on this trip. I scoured Google Satellite to make sure we had plenty of water sources to filter water. And, we wanted to make sure we were really equipped for it. And it ended up going pretty well. We left Richmond at about 5 a.m. and headed to Durban, ditched the truck, and jumped on our bikes. We were really excited. The weather for the trip was a little wacky looking. It seemed like we were going to be having kind of misting rain for most of these days, but we were hopeful. Even if we just got there and had a nice bike ride and camped, we were going to have a good time. And that's kind of the beauty of trips like these. You just sort of take it at your own pace and enjoy yourself. That's also a great part about single speed is that it forces you to take it at that pace. You don't really have a lot of options. We headed on the rail trail, and the land was just absolutely staggeringly beautiful. We were riding through valleys with mountains all around us. We were riding a mixture of, a single pathway through grass meadows. Sometimes it was double track. Sometimes we were just riding on soft pine needles or on really loamy soil. It was just so quiet and so nice to ride. We headed up towards a town called Alpena after we ended the rail trail riding in Gladdy. And from Alpena, we were on pavement again for a good portion of time. We knew we would be kind of on and off pavement, like gravel or pavement, up until we got to Canaan Valley, where we would start single track riding. We took little breaks here and there and made sure to kind of reward our efforts on some of these longer climbs by stopping in a creek to filter water and making coffee or having a snack. It was a good way to kind of keep our attitudes stoked and happy and make sure we weren't pushing ourselves too hard. Single speed and elevation gain can kind of wear you down, and it's important to just listen to your body and have fun with it. And something we kept in the front of our minds for a lot of this trip. At the end of day one, we were heading on this particularly long road climb and finished up, and the valley view was just incredible. The fog was rolling in, it was misting, it was just like so beautiful, y'all. This was in fall and the leaves were just starting to change. So we had these spots of yellow all through the horizon. It was just absolutely stunning. One thing that a lot of people might not know is that when you travel in the mountains like this, you lose daylight really quickly. As soon as the sun starts to set and it goes behind the mountain, you're kind of in sunset in the valley, and that might be as early as 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we finished this road climb and we could see on our bike computers that we had a descent coming up. And so we started to think about where we should camp because it was getting kind of late in the day. We wanted to camp before the descent if possible, because this descent took us down to a small town. And we ended up we passed sort of this little abandoned looking church and ended up turning back and going to the church and kind of quietly camping in their backyard. It was closed. There was no one there. And it was a lovely little place to just like quietly and respectfully stay. The animals definitely let us know all night long that they were not happy with us being there. The next morning we woke up and it was raining, but not hard rain, just like kind of a misty and sometimes a little steady rain. We packed up, made coffee and breakfast, and hit the road. We had a bomb down to the town called Jenningston, where we filtered some water again, and then headed back up onto a long series of climbs. Day 2 was the most terrain change that we saw, and so it felt like such a full day. It was also like the only day of the trip that didn't involve driving and travel. So it was really just like a very full day on the bike. Did some long climbing, and in the rain, it kind of, it was actually just really so beautiful that I think nothing else really fazed us about it. It was maybe 50 or 60 degrees, and sometimes that's a turnoff, but this was really just so pleasant. We finished up a long climb through cow pasture and came to the top of the elevation and made second breakfast, more coffee, and then started downhill what we thought was going to be a little bit more road, but it turns out we just made like an absolute left-hand turn into a meadow. And this was the start of Canaan Valley and Canaan Mountain for us. It was really funny and kind of amazing. I'm not sure how they maintained that mow, but they did a great job with it. We had initially hoped to camp here and didn't quite, and I'm really glad we didn't, because there was bear poop everywhere and there was nowhere to really tie up your food in a tree. So we would have been laughing a lot. We started into Canaan Valley and the terrain immediately just became woody and beautiful. It went from that meadow to these soft wooded trails. Everything was covered in moss and lichen. You would ride through sections of evergreen and spruce as the terrain changed. And one thing that deserves its whole own conversation is the fact that Canaan Valley and its next door neighbor Dolly Sods has like a little pocket of Arctic tundra ecology in it. It's so beautiful and so interesting. In this photo with all the little white dots, it's tawny cotton grass. And a lot of these plants, they grow in bogs. And it was beautiful to be in this really random ecology so quickly and so unexpectedly. There's rhododendron, there's spruce, and there's sphagnum moss everywhere. We kept riding the trail, and the closer we got towards Blackwater Falls, the more technical stuff was getting. Lots and lots of big rocks, big roots. Everything was slippery from the rain that morning, so we just took it easy. We didn't want to get hurt. We didn't want to break our bikes. Certainly going over rocks on a loaded mountain bike, you want to be a little mindful. You don't want to crack a rim. The terrain was pretty tight. The rhododendron forest was often just barely as wide as our handlebars. But as we popped out at Blackwater Natural Area, we got really excited. We knew we were close to Davis, which meant close to the one food stop we were going to make. We ended up, hucking it pretty quickly up to Davis and getting takeout hoagies that straight up saved our life. There was a very short little boop on the road over to a town called Thomas. Wasn't super ideal for riding, but it was short. And then once we got to Thomas, we jumped onto the Blackwater Canyon Trail that runs kind of downhill from there. This photo might not look like much, but this was just straight up like going 16 miles an hour on a loaded single speed mountain bike, just laughing because we were going so fast for the duration of this 10-mile trail. It follows the river down through these incredible views, and eventually you land very close to the river. We were able to camp night 3 right beside the river. The fog rolled into the valley, the sunset, we crushed these hoagies, and it was pretty amazing. The next morning we woke up and there was actual sun. It was such a mood changer. Just absolutely beautiful through the valley. Again, just like hitting all the colors of the trees. Just a huge shout out to Mother Nature there. From the town of Hendricks, we rolled towards Parsons and towards Meadows for the day. Parsons, that gap between Parsons and Meadows was all gravel road, all through Otter Creek Wildlife Area. Lots of camping options for you. But then once we hit Meadows, it was riding a highway, which was super stressful. A very fast highway over a mountain range. Thankfully, there's a huge shoulder, like almost as wide as a car. So you're pretty safe there. Just stay in the shoulder and not worry about it too much. But as we got towards like maybe halfway up the mountain, they were doing construction. And so there's no photos of this part of the trip because we were just hustling. They were doing construction. So we had to like kind of boot into the traffic little bits, and it was pretty stressful. We made a pact that once we got back to the Alpine Lodge in Alpena, we were going to make food, like crush some water, and then power through the last 30 miles of the trip, the stick of the lollipop, where we had already kind of ridden. So we did just that. We made our last pasta at the Alpine Lodge and then kind of took our time getting back the rest of the way home. One thing that was really wonderful about this trip was that there were sections where we would pop into old growth apple orchards. So you could just kind of snag some apples for breakfast or to take home. Kind of an amazing little bit there that I thought was really lovely. But yeah, that was West Virginia. And I really hope you guys can make it out that direction at some point in time. It was just absolutely beautiful. Oh, sorry guys, I'm not getting any audio. Bear with me.
I just realized I was on mute for like 2 minutes. It's cool. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. I was like, uh-oh.
That was my fault. Great. I'll start over. Your photos are great. I used to live in DC, and I feel like Canaan Valley is just like a hidden gem, not far from the city, and it's gorgeous there.
It really.
I just want to thanks to folks for staying with us. I know it's late on the East Coast, so appreciate everyone being here, and I just love the energy from these stories. So thank you. So our first question is, how does one identify bear poop?
Oh my gosh, it's big, and it's full of all kinds of little vegetable bits, like sometimes corn or whatever, but it's like, it's big, y'all. It's gross. There was so much of it.
I have seen a bear, but not bear poop. So thank you for that information.
How much there was. Maybe don't camp there.
And then how do you manage ticks and other critters like that when you're bike packing?
I just look for them. Sometimes I bring a little travel spray bottle of DEET, and that kind of helps for stuff if you've got to really keep an eye out. But mostly you just kind of have to look for them and hope for the best. Hopefully you don't wander into sea ticks, and if you do, I hope you get them all.
Right. And someone says, any signs of bootleg distillation activity in that area?
Oh man, not that I saw. only beautiful mountain bike trails.
And were the roads fairly chilly, quiet, or was there traffic to navigate while you were out there? And what did you experience?
A lot of this trip was off-road. The little bits that we had on-road were pretty minimal. The only really tricky stuff was maybe that Meadows mountain pass was a little stressful. But mostly we didn't really have too much. I think we saw a guy like on a riding lawnmower. There were some ATV riders, but mostly it was pretty wonderful. Pretty traffic free on this one.
I may have to check that route out for a future trip.
It's really cool. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm glad to see some East Coast representation. So.
Yeah. I love it.
So that's about 10K elevation on a single speed. Someone's curious what gear ratio you were running.
I did 32-22, which is pretty comfy for me for climbing. I know everybody's different. And I really nerded out about this trip because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going into it underprepared. I looked at the grades and I looked how long they were. I really dug deep to make sure I wasn't gonna just walk a lot.
Right.
And that seemed like a pretty good one. Spinny, but not too spinny.
And with curiosity, do you have any like luxury items or one or two items you like can't go without on your bike packing trips that you are sort of your go-tos?
Definitely bringing like actual coffee beans is a treat. That's like a luxury item. And I did bring beans on this trip because it was kind of vacation. It was like 3 days off from the bike shop. So going on vacation, I brought some nice beans to make coffee with. Usually I would just pack instant for quickness and lightweight nature, but went with the grounds on this one. But this trip too, usually I always pack a backup battery and a cable, but because I run dynamo hubs on some of my bikes, I was able to just like charge multi-day without ever really running into anybody with that system, which was really helpful and really cool. A great way to be like super self-sufficient.
What grinder do you use for your beans? This is my question.
Ooh, I have a little hand grinder that I got off eBay, and it's tall, skinny, and aluminum, and it breaks in half, and the handle comes off. I don't know what brand it is.
I have a GSI Outdoors one. That's cool, but it does not break in half. That's cool.
Yeah, this one packs down to like a pretty good size. It's helpful.
Yeah, mine's an odd shape, so it's hard to like fit in the back sometimes. Okay. Last question. Would you recommend this route over spring, summer as well?
I think it would be beautiful then. Yeah, I think some of the rail trail would be overgrown, but I think you could make your own adventure about it. I think if you did it in the spring and summer, you would have to be a little more wary of like ticks and other guys that you could pick up, little buggies and mosquitoes, but mostly I think we were like close enough to the tail end of like our East Coast summer that it was still pretty pleasant. Day 3, it hit almost 60 degrees. So it felt really lucky.
Perfect.
Felt good. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. We love having you here, and those photos are great. So Jess is going to come in and introduce our final speaker, Roxy, last but not least.
Yay. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. I am really happy to introduce our next and final speaker of the night. She's a good friend of mine, and we like met each other during COVID times, and we got really close, and it was really lovely. And I didn't expect to, just forge such strong friendships during COVID. And being here with you all in this like digital space is like giving me a lot of joy in life right now too. And it makes me miss all of you all. So hi, friends that are all out there. Let me introduce Roxy. Roxy is a cyclist, urban planner, seamstress, and Filipinx food enthusiast. She thinks tarot cards are an essential item on any packing list and loves to talk about feelings. She started bike touring in 2017 after realizing that bike touring was not that different from hauling panniers full of groceries up and down Seattle hills. And yeah, that is a workout and a good training regimen. Last year, she published a comprehensive guide to bike anatomy and bike touring, which is available on her website, aptly named feelsonwheels.net. She volunteers with the Bikery as the fundraising lead and with Outdoors for All as a skiing and cycling instructor. And please use the chat box for your questions just throughout. And take it away, Roxy.
Thank you so much, Jess. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I really treasure our friendship, and I'm so glad we made that connection during COVID. So hello, everyone. My name is Roxy Robles. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to talk to you about a trip to Tenino and Numu territories in Central Eastern Oregon last year. Jess gave me a great introduction. I'm an urban planner and designer. And I live in Coast Salish, specifically Duwamish territories in Seattle, Washington. I love volunteering and giving back to my community, so I do that with the Bikery and Outdoors for All. And last year, as Jess mentioned, I published a book about bike touring in English and Spanish. I decided to embark on this project because when I looked at a lot of blogs, a lot of them seemed to be written with the intent of, riding cross country or like riding across continents. And so I wanted to kind of compile and synthesize advice that I had put together, or I had gathered through my experience in a really approachable way for someone who's just a more casual cyclist or commuter. So yeah, you can find it on my website, and there's lots of other blog posts about cycling and feelings. That's the book. I'm really proud of it. So last year was not the first time I had attempted this route. My friend Renata planned a trip in 2019 with 11 wonderful femmes. The people in that group are so dear to me. That trip unfortunately did not go so well. We got rained on, we had mechanical issues, and the elevation gain really beat us up. So last year in October, we tried again with a smaller but equally mighty group. The route started and ended at the Service Creek Resort, where we stayed. It's pretty remote. There are only a few places to get supplies and gas. So if you've watched the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country, this is near where the Rajneeshi cult took over the town of Antelope. So it's pretty out there. We reserved these canvas glamping tents, which were bought on auction from the Rajneeshis when the cult collapsed. So yeah, you can see the tent behind Ricarius there. They're actually pretty cozy. They outfit them pretty nicely. So the route is really tough. There's a lot of elevation gain, and even in October, it was still really hot and dry. But it's worth the pain because the landscapes are so gorgeous. The ecology and the geology is just stunning, and you just kind of dip in and out and up and down buttes and valleys, so you get all kinds of different views. Riding through this landscape for the second time, I was more keenly aware of how much Western juniper, Juniperus occidentalis, was growing in the grasslands. It looked familiar, but also out of place. So this is a view from our ride back to the Service Creek Resort, and this view really struck me as strange. On the left, you can kind of tell that there's been no land management. And on the right, the property has had juniper invaders cleared and burned. So how did it get like this? Juniper is a really tough and hardy shrub. It's native to this region and it's adapted to growing on rocky outcroppings. It has drought and wind tolerant needles and a deep taproot that plunges through rock to suck up any and all water it can find. It's been encroaching on sagebrush and grassland, however, shading out the more sensitive understory plants and displacing the sage grouse and other native songbirds that rely on sagebrush for habitat and reproduction. Western juniper has become invasive because of an incredibly swift shift in land management. Prior to white settler colonialism, the Taino and Numu regularly burned the grasslands to prevent catastrophic fires and preserve grazing land for antelope and deer, which they hunt. This also had the effect of controlling the spread of juniper from the Rocky Mountaintops because conifers are sensitive to fire. The introduction of cattle and sheep completely changed the landscape as livestock ate the grasses that created fuel for fire, and attitudes in the late 19th century shifted, creating a century of policies that suppress it. So I have to credit Rebecca Heisman's 2016 article, The Tree That Ate the West, for all this information. It's a great read, and I highly recommend it if you want to dig deeper into this topic. Oh, come on. So pedaling along, I was thinking about the landscape and my mind kind of drifted to this concept of wilderness, virgin wilderness or virgin land. These concepts are racist and they erase millennia of Indigenous stewardship. The idea of wilderness perpetuates a lot of outdoor recreation culture, and it perpetuates the idea that some lands are devoid of human influence or management. However, Indigenous people throughout the world have and still do manage landscapes in myriad ways. Using terms for wilderness for certain places, such as those that were taken by force and are now only accessible by permit or fee, erases the history of this care. National parks and wildernesses are white supremacist inventions. They've been used to erase Indigenous stewardship in service of land's industrial and commercial benefit and capitalism. So Western ideology considers conservation to be a positive endeavor, but I question how this value system can exist if these places are mismanaged and take considerable effort to restore and maintain. So you can see in this photo, this is of the management taking place that was taking place kind of on the right side of that previous photo. Juniper is cut down and burned on top of the stump, and it's really expensive and time intensive. And I would just consider that it's really expensive and time intensive to walk backwards. So it's really important as people who cycle or recreate outdoors that we educate ourselves and advocate for Indigenous sovereignty and recognize that there is history in landscapes. You're a guest, especially if you're not Indigenous. The landscapes we see today are likely very different from those that existed before the violent dispossession of Indigenous people. So I was thinking about all this as we coasted through these incredible landscapes. I was probably thinking a little bit too hard because I was the navigator and I made a mistake and took a wrong turn. Luckily, it was a happy mistake. It took us down Twickenham Road through this gorgeous canyon. Still have not finished the intended route that we first attempted in 2019, but now I know that there are lots of different options in this area. And here are three of kind of the routes that I put together. I have them, all the Ride with GPS links on my blog post about this trip. So I hope this inspires you to ride the Oregon scenic bikeways and to be an informed and gracious guest wherever you go. I want to thank the people that helped me edit and inspire me to keep pedaling, Nat, Amanda, and my shrimpy gals. Thank you all so much.
Wow. I love how like eloquently and fiercely you are talking about the impact on the land that language has, right? Language as it translates into recreation as well. And I think that's really powerful and something that we as adventurers, right, need to be really aware of and mindful of. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Just looking at the timer. Okay. I'm getting some assistance from my co-host here for questions because I didn't see any questions coming in. We got one about tire sizes. What tire size would you suggest for that route?
So if you didn't make a wrong turn like I did, the loop that would have taken you to the Painted Hills Monument is somewhat gravelly. I think I had 35s on, and the roads aren't completely smooth because they're pretty out there, but that was comfy for me. Go bigger if you want more cush.
Yeah, and I will tell you from personal experience riding with Roxy, Roxy will ride on anything with 35 millimeter tires. It's like, you can do it if you put your mind to it. You might walk sometimes, but that's part of the fun. Someone is asking, what is the elevation of the route that you took?
Oh yeah, so the intended route was around 6,400 feet elevation. The 46-mile route that the guys ended up doing was, I think, a little over 5,000. And then because we took that wrong turn and then went down and got burgers and kind of took our time, we ended up actually doing almost 7,000 feet of elevation that day, which was more than any of us had ever done. I just want to share this little anecdote from, we were getting lunch and we were like packing up, and one of the other restaurant patrons was like, "So where are you going?" And we were like, "Oh, back to Service Creek." And he was like, "Isn't that like 30 miles?" And we were like, "Yeah." And he just mumbles animals under his breath, like he just couldn't believe that someone would do that to themselves.
Yeah, I ask myself that every time I go on a bike trip that I feel like I would regret, but end up being a really good time. Okay, we got a question from Monique, who actually, I'm wearing earrings from Monique Revolta Art. Just a quick shout out. Monique's wondering if you have any recommended resources for continued learning on being and becoming a good guest to the land.
That is such a great question. native-land.ca is a wonderful resource, and they have an app, so you can pull it up wherever you are and click on where you are, and it'll tell you whose land you're on. And there's usually links to like the official websites of the tribe or stewards of that land. I'm coming at this from like a landscape ecological perspective, but because Indigenous people stewarded land, lands evolved with Indigenous people in a lot of cases. So a lot of time when you dig into the ecology, you are also digging into like human ecology. And so if you're interested in that perspective, looking at landscape ecology with a critical lens will kind of guide you in the right way.
Yeah, there was a little section when you were speaking that like broke up a little bit for me. I'm not sure if it did for anyone else, but Roxy also is like really active on like social medias and stuff too, and like is a well of knowledge in terms of like ecology and nerding out on research resources. So I invite you to give her a follow. We got a question about do you have any go-to or favorite resources to learn about ecology and land history?
I'm privileged in that I studied landscape architecture. So part of that was learning about plants and kind of learning how to learn about plants. I can't think, off the top of my head of any particular book because, it's regional and there's even like microclimates within regions. So sometimes like if there's an ag college near you, usually they will have like native plant specialists or native people that study native plants and native landscapes. So you could kind of start there. They're usually called like the extension service. So you can kind of start there. Or, oh my gosh, how did I even forget? Robin Wall Kimmerer wrote this book called Braiding Sweetgrass. I have not full body sobbed reading a book like that ever before. Everybody should read that. She also has a book about moss, but read Braiding Sweetgrass, read it again and again, and just like sob by yourself about how we need to love plants more.
Yes, ditto. I really took my time reading Braiding Sweetgrass because I just didn't want it to end. I would go only allowed myself to read one chapter at a time. I kid you not.
So
and it took me a while, but it's amazing. I think we have a quick question and then another question. Yes, Segura, hi Betty, asks, will you write another book?
Oh, that one took a lot out of me. I don't know what the book would be about. But yeah, who knows? Let me know if there's topics you want to learn about. I love writing, and I feel like a lot of my volunteerism focus on like education and mentorship. So yeah, tell me what you want to learn about and I'll figure out a way to make it into pretty graphics and concise paragraphs.
And our last question is from Becca. How does your knowledge of ecology and our colonial history enrich and inform your bike packing, such as choosing different routes or learning from the land that you're in and others?
I wish I could say there was a stronger connection, but I've always really noticed landscapes, and so when stuff like the juniper kind of jumps out at me, I might not have thought about it before going on the trip, but I'll definitely figure it out when I get back. I'm always curious about plants and geology, because the geology of a place usually determines a lot about the ecology, because there's certain minerals that are in certain types of rocks that aren't in other types of rocks. But yeah, maybe I'll make that a more intentional connection going forward. I wish I could say it was more intentional, but I'm just curious, I guess.
Yeah, that curiosity definitely resonates with me too. Like, I want to know who's around me, not as in like people, but like all living things, right? When I'm hiking through these areas. I think that's all our questions for today. Thank you so much, Roxy. What a lovely way to round out our night. And I want to thank all of our presenters for sharing their stories. Please give it up for them in the chat. I am so honored to be a part of this community. It makes me so happy. And there were a lot of questions about where can I find this route? Where can I find these links? So many things. Swift will have many of those things available on their blog. I have a slide I'm supposed to share, I think. Yes. Yes, I do.
And we're just bringing all the presenters back to do one more thank you. So grateful to each of you for taking the time to share your stories, to prepare, to be present. We know we're in a time of fatigue, and it really means a lot to us that you would be present for this and put time and preparation into it and share vulnerability and your experience. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
And just a big shout out to our sponsors. Again, Velocio, Topo Designs, Therativis, and Ride GPS. And Jess is going to queue up a slide here just for some notes for folks. Swift has their upcoming wheel building class, March 20th to 21st in Seattle. This is not a sleepover. And you can find more info at swiftadventure.co. We are still accepting submissions for BIPOC night. Jess and I will be back co-hosting that on March 31st, same time, same place. And on April 28th, Jason will be hosting the season finale. So appreciate each of you. And as Jess said, we will be, Swift will be sharing these routes on their blog and brief descriptions. And you can check out the YouTube show notes for more details. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Ta-ta. Good night, East Coast.